He wasn't new to the trail. Over the years, he had hiked sections of the Appalachian Mountains whenever life in the city grew too loud. This trip was supposed to be simple, a 3-day solo trek to clear his head. The weather was steady, the map well marked, and his pack loaded with everything he might need. There was no reason to feel uneasy, at least not at first. By late afternoon, he found a quiet spot just off the main path, a patch of flat ground near a line of tall pines, far enough from the trail to avoid other hikers, but close enough to feel safe. He pitched his tent, stacked some stones for a fire ring, and cooked a modest meal while the forest shifted from gold to black. The silence that settled over the woods was deeper than he expected. He told himself that was what he came for: stillness, no voices, no noise, but the crackle of his fire. He wrote a few notes in his journal, stared up at the stars peeking through the canopy, and crawled into his tent with the sense that tomorrow would be nothing more than miles of quiet walking. But sometime after midnight, he woke to a sound that did not belong. At first, he thought it was the wind slipping through the pines, a high, thin note that rose and fell, faint enough that he almost dismissed it. But as he lay still, listening, the sound came again, clearer this time. Not the random moan of branches, but a short melody. Just a few notes whistled deliberately, then silence. He propped himself up on one elbow, straining to hear. The woods outside were still, the fire reduced to glowing embers. Another whistle drifted through the night, slightly closer. It wasn't loud, but it carried in a way that made his chest tighten. It sounded human. His first thought was another camper, maybe someone wandering the woods or playing a prank. But who whistles at midnight in the middle of nowhere? He flicked on his flashlight and aimed it through the mesh of his tent. The beam caught only trees, their trunks pale and endless, no movement at all. For nearly an hour the sound returned, always the same few notes, always from a different spot. Far off, then closer, then gone. Finally, silence reclaimed the hollow. He lay back down, convincing himself it was nothing more than imagination. But deep down, unease took root, because the whistle hadn't sounded random. It had sounded like someone letting him know he wasn't alone. The next morning, the forest looked harmless again. Sunlight streamed through the canopy, birds sang overhead, and he almost laughed at himself for being spooked. Packing his gear, he pushed the memory of the whistling aside. It was easier to call it a trick of the wind than admit how much it had rattled him. But by mid-afternoon, as he climbed a ridge, the sound returned. A short string of notes, faint but unmistakable. He froze mid-step. There it was again, behind him this time. He turned sharply, scanning the trail. Nothing but trees swaying gently in the breeze. He walked faster, telling himself it had to be coincidence. Yet minutes later, the tune followed, drifting through the air like it was tethered to him. He stopped cold. Silence. He started moving again. Whistle. It was as if whoever made it was matching his pace exactly. His throat went dry. He wasn't lost. He wasn't hallucinating. Someone was out there. But why whistle the same notes again and again? To signal? To mock? To lure? He tried shouting, "Hello, who's there?" But the woods gave nothing back except the rustle of leaves. For the rest of the day, the pattern repeated. Silence when he stood still, whistling when he walked. By the time he made camp that evening, his nerves were frayed raw. And as night crept in, he prayed the sound wouldn't return. But it did. Darkness settled quickly under the pines, and with it came the uneasy silence he now recognized. He built a larger fire, stacking wood high, as if more light could push away whatever had been shadowing him. The crackle of flames offered some comfort, but his ears strained past it, waiting. The first whistle came not long after midnight. Just a few notes, drifting through the black. His chest tightened. Another followed, this one from the opposite side of camp. He spun, flashlight beam cutting into the trees, but there was nothing. No eyes reflecting back, no movement. Minutes stretched like hours as the sound circled. Sometimes it was faint, as if far up the ridge. Other times it was so close he could swear the air vibrated near his ear. And then came the crunch of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing around the perimeter of the firelight. He called out, demanding whoever it was show themselves. Only silence answered, until the whistle floated again, this time almost playful. Sleep was impossible. He sat upright with his knife in hand, heart hammering, watching shadows shift. Each time he thought it was over, the sound returned, steady, patient, as though it had all night to remind him he wasn't alone. By dawn he was hollow-eyed and shaking, certain of one thing: it wasn't an animal. Someone was out there, and they wanted him to know it. That evening, he gathered more wood than he could carry, building the biggest fire yet. The flames roared high, sparks twisting into the night sky. He told himself it was foolish. If anything, a fire this big would draw attention. But the dark between the trees felt unbearable without it. For a while, the woods were quiet. He dared to hope maybe it was over. Then, just as the fire sank lower, the whistle drifted out again. The same short tune, as clear as if someone were standing just beyond the trees. His stomach clenched. He tightened his grip on the knife. Every sense sharpened. And then he saw it. Not clearly, not enough to name, but a shadow moving against the fire's glow. A tall, lean shape slipping between trunks, pausing, then sliding out of sight again. His throat went dry. He swung the flashlight, but the beam caught only smoke and branches. The whistle returned, but this time it wasn't alone. Underneath it, so faint he thought he imagined it, came the sound of a laugh. Low, breathy, and close. The fire sputtered in the draft, the light weakening for a moment. When it flared again, he swore he saw the shadow crouched low, as if watching from the tree line. That was when he knew. This wasn't just sound anymore. Something was here, and it was no longer trying to hide. By sunrise, he couldn't take it anymore. He packed in a frenzy, hands shaking as he shoved gear into his bag and left the hollow without eating. The trail stretched ahead, golden light filtering through the trees, but none of it felt safe. Every turn, every ridge, he expected to hear it again. And he did. Barely an hour into his hike, the whistle returned. Short, deliberate notes, always the same melody. At first behind him, then to his right, then ahead, as if it had moved faster than he could walk. His pace quickened, boots pounding the dirt, heart racing. But no matter how far he went, the sound followed. He stopped suddenly, spun around with his flashlight, even though it was daylight, and shouted into the trees. Silence. Then, right beside his ear, the whistle came again. So close, he felt the air shift. He stumbled forward, nearly tripping, panic exploding through him. The rest of the day blurred into a nightmare of sound. Sometimes the notes floated from far down the valley. Other times they snapped into existence just a few feet away. No matter how fast he moved, he couldn't shake them. It wasn't just following. It was toying with him, weaving in and out of reach. By the time dusk fell, exhaustion nearly dropped him. But he knew one thing for certain. He could not stop moving. He decided not to set up camp. Stopping meant giving it another chance to circle him, to creep just beyond the firelight. So he kept walking long after the sun bled away, his flashlight beam jerking across the trail. His legs shook with fatigue, but fear kept them moving. The whistles came like clockwork, sometimes far, drifting down from the ridges, sometimes near, close enough that the notes rang sharp in his skull. At one point, the sound bloomed on both sides at once, as if two people were calling back and forth across the trail. He staggered forward, nearly sobbing, convinced he'd collapse before morning. Then it changed. The whistle shifted pitch, slower, almost mocking, and when he swung his light to the tree line, he saw it, just for a moment, a tall, lean shadow standing upright among the pines. Its head cocked, the same melody spilling softly into the night. His beam flickered over it, but before he could focus, it vanished. He froze, chest heaving, unable to move. When the whistle came again, right behind him this time, instinct broke his paralysis. He ran. He didn't care where the trail led, only that his feet never stopped. And through the endless night, the tune followed, patient, steady, as if it knew he had nowhere else to go. When the first streaks of dawn lit the sky, he finally stumbled into the trailhead parking lot. His chest burned, his legs trembled with each step, and his mind felt frayed thin. He dropped his pack into the dirt and fumbled with his keys, convinced that at any second the whistle would rise again behind him. But the woods stood silent. No shadow, no sound, only the echo of his own ragged breathing. He drove away without looking back. The whole ride home, he kept checking his mirrors, half expecting to see someone walking along the roadside, whistling that same eerie tune. Nothing followed. Still, he couldn't shake the dread that it hadn't really stayed behind. Later, when he searched online, he found he wasn't the only one. Dozens of hikers had written about the Appalachian whistler, short, deliberate notes in the night, always circling, always following. Some said it was folklore. Others swore it was a predator that knew how to mimic human sounds. A few even described seeing the same tall shadow among the trees. To this day, he refuses to whistle, even casually. The sound makes his skin crawl. Because in his mind, the mountains had taught him a truth no one else wanted to hear. Once the whistler finds you, the silence never feels like silence again.